Monday, July 17, 2023. The time is now 5:30 p.m. The call board meeting for the Bibb County Board of Education will now come to order. I'm used to having my back turned, so I just want to say to the audience that is here, thank you so much for being here. Good to see everyone. All right. Board members, you should have a copy of the agenda before you. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as printed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Freeman, second by Vice President Johnson. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the agenda as printed, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same right. Ayes have it, and the agenda is passed unanimously. We now move on to the millage rate presentation, and before our Chief Financial Officer comes up, I'm going to yield the floor to our Superintendent, Dr. Sims, for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Board President Jackson, and good afternoon to all of our community members who joined us. And before we turn the floor over to Sharon Roberts, our Chief Financial Officer, I'd like to offer just a few words in preparation for this presentation. Over the course of the past several months, we've talked about several factors, including inside this budget season, to include opportunities to continue being competitive in terms of salaries, analysis of scenarios where cost cuts can occur within our district, significant and sudden increases in state mandates connected to health benefits, increases in cost due to inflation, and multi-year outlooks in terms of our efforts to maintain strong financial stability and health for our district, all while addressing post-COVID needs and concerns in our community. Since January, we've provided comprehensive information in anticipation of our 23-24 budget, while also considering long-term impact on our overall budget and fund balance. Today, we look forward to providing information on key millage rate scenarios and the associated impacts of the same. We feel this information will be key in ensuring we do what is best in the short and long term for our community, our students, and those who work with them every day. We will use this school year as we sunset ESSER funds to study all district expenditures in order to finalize opportunities for savings. However, we recognize this exercise must consider our current times in terms of recovering from the impacts of unfinished learning between 2020 and 2022. I'm grateful to our Chief Financial Officer, Sharon Roberts, and her team for their hard work, not just in putting together this millage rate presentation, but all of the connected work and presentations leading up to this time where we have looked closely at ways to cut costs and or increase revenues. We also recognize that we have a new strategic plan where we intend to lay a strong foundation for this year and the next 5 years. And we look forward to sustaining our district on this journey as best as possible. We know this means being good stewards of district funds while we make good decisions about what is best for our students and the future of the district. With this being said, we will ask Sharon Roberts to lead us through this presentation, and we look forward to your feedback and your questions as a Board of Education.
Good evening, President Jackson, board members, Superintendent Dr. Sims. Tonight we'll look at the calendar year 2023 or fiscal year 2024 preliminary tax digest and the preliminary millage rate. Our mission: the Bibb County School District maximizes student achievement and social emotional well-being by building a sense of community in safe, equitable learning environments. And our vision: students are empowered to learn, lead, innovate, and serve as productive and caring citizens within their chosen paths of success. Our goals are student achievement, staff effectiveness, stakeholder engagement, and our guiding principles: personalized learning, collaboration, engagement, safety, and effective leadership. And we want all of our learners to graduate and be matched and enrolled, motivated to enlist, molded for entrepreneurship, or meaningfully employed. The overview. The purpose of this presentation is share the preliminary digest numbers and the preliminary rollback millage rate with the Bibb County Board of Education. The board will be presented with 3 options, option A, B, and C for millage rates. Option A is maintaining the current millage rate. Option B is half of the rollback millage rate. And option C is a full rollback millage rate. The roadmap, this presentation will cover the preliminary digest numbers as received from the County Tax Commissioner's Office on June 12, 2023. So we do not have the final digest numbers as of today. And the calculation of the rollback millage rate. An option for a full rollback millage rate, a partial rollback millage rate, and a no rollback millage rate will be provided, showing the corresponding implications for future budgets and the financial stability of our district. The decision in setting the calendar year 2023 millage rate will determine the level of funding the district has available to continue to support current and/or new educational programs, our schools, employee salaries, and staffing levels, which in turn will influence reaching our strategic goals of student achievement, staff effectiveness, and stakeholder engagement. It could also position the district to better compete with surrounding district salaries, which affect recruitment and retention efforts for FY 2024 and beyond. The next two pages just list some of the terminology that you may hear tonight as I discuss the millage rate. For instance, the first is levying authority. This is Macon, Bibb County. It has the power to levy the actual taxes on the governing authority's purpose. The governing authority is the Bibb County Board of Education, and they exercise that power to set the millage rate and determine the levying authority to levy the ad valorem taxes to carry out those purposes set by the Board of Education. The ad valorem tax, or property tax, is a tax imposed upon the assessed value of real property. The certified tax digest is the total net assessed value of the annual property tax digest certified by the tax commissioner. And the net assessed value is the taxable assessed value of property after all exemptions have been deducted. So the preliminary net assessed value is $5.6 billion. The rollback rate means the previous year's millage rate minus the millage equivalent of the total net assessed value added by reassessments. So the current calculated rollback rate on our preliminary digest is 14.13 mils. So that 2.070 that you see there is that millage equivalent, which represents that reassessment value of your property taxes. And a mil is 1/1000th of a US dollar. And the preliminary value of 1 mil for the calendar year 2023 is $5,611,816. The millage rate is the levy in mills, which is established by the Bibb County Board of Education for purposes of financing in whole or in part the work of the district. The millage equivalent, again, is that 2.07 calculation, which is the net assessed value added by reassessments divided by the certified tax digest and multiplied by the previous year's millage rate. This comparative tax digest schedule compares 2023 with the final calendar year 2022. So you see over in the left column the different classifications that are in a part of the digest. The next column of the numbers is the final calendar year 2023 preliminary tax digest as of June 12th, 2023. So if you come all the way to the bottom of that column, the net M&O digest is $5.6 billion. And then compare it to the final for 2022, you'll see in that very last number is $4.86 billion. That is a $768,000 increase from prior year. For the preliminary tax digest by category, residential property makes up 49% of the digest, commercial 35%, industrial 10%, utility 3%. Next two slides will show how the rollback rate is actually calculated. So you start out with the 2022 digest. To that, you add the reassessed value of the property, which is $694.9 million. Add to that the other changes to the taxable digest. This is real additions to the digest. New property or deductions from property, and that's $63.3 million. When you add those three numbers together, you come up with a 2023 preliminary digest of $5.6 billion. And then to calculate that rollback rate or the millage equivalent, you take, this is just the mathematical formula that shows you how you get to that rollback millage rate of 14.668. Now I'm going to show you three different options that I discussed earlier. On all of these options, you'll see some of the same slides, but with different numbers in them, depending on what the millage rate would be set as, and what some of the assumptions would be of what cuts we would also have to make our budget in future years stable. So in option A, as a reminder, this is maintaining the current millage rate of 16.72 mills. You'll see in that first column, you look at the $5.6 million, that's the value of a mill, by the 16.72 mill rate, this would generate $93.8 million in tax revenue. Off of that, 2.5% is deducted for the tax commissioners for their job in sending out the bills, for collecting the taxes, and then remitting our portion to us. And then we also estimate about 2% would be uncollectible in any given year. So that would leave the estimated property taxes that the school district would expect to receive of $89.7 million. To that, you add those taxes that are not on the digest, along with your tagged or car tag taxes and any pilot payments that we would expect to get. So that projected property taxes with maintaining the millage rate, we would expect to get $101.3 million in total tax revenue. The approved budget had $90.9 million. So this would mean that the district would receive an additional $10.4 million in revenue by not rolling the tax rate back, but maintaining the 16.72. And then the next column just compares the last year's numbers. So that total increase is 9.6 from last year. So what would it cost the homeowner if we maintain the 2022 millage rate? So if you had an average home property of $150,000 that had homestead exemption, the 40% assessed value would be $60,000. From that, you would subtract the $7,000 homestead exemption. So the net value of the house that would actually be taxed would be $53,000. Applying the 16.72 millage rate, that tax assessed to that homeowner would be $886.16. Then if you compared that to the rollback rate of 14.65, the tax assessed to the owner at that rate would be $776.45. So it would cost an additional $109.71 on that property of $150,000. If you look at it on a monthly basis, that would be $9.14, the additional cost for maintaining the millage rate at our current rate. The next set of columns is the same 150,000, but there's no homestead exemption. So therefore, you are not able to deduct the $7,000 tax credit. So then your net assessed value would be 60,000. So the new cost would be $1,033.20 compared to $879. So the added cost would be $129.20. And the monthly would be $10.35 to that homeowner for a property of $150,000. Here is the trends for our millage rate since 2012. You'll notice in 2012, the millage rate was 17.945 mills. For the next 3 years, 2013, 14, and 15, the rate was maintained. It was not rolled back, the rate was maintained. In 2016, the Board of Education approved a 2 mill increase, which raised the millage rate to 19.945. Then you'll see for 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22, our tax millage rate has been decreased, has been rolled back all the way down to the current 16.72. So we're now currently at a millage rate lower than we were in 2012. Now we're going to look at the trends. If you'll remember back in the budget process, I showed you several slides with scenarios for the next 5 years. The first scenario being if we did absolutely nothing, if we did not make any cuts, and if we left, and if we did not add any additional taxes, so no millage rate change. So, and then the next one is if we made certain cuts. So here is the one that has the millage rate, no additional cuts in expenditures, and no increase in the millage rate from FY25 through 2029. You'll see the ending fund balance for 23 is projected at 58.8 million, which is a ratio of 25.52% of expenditures to fund balance. For 24, you'll remember that we had a deficit approved budget, but under this scenario, with the additional 10.4 million, we now would have a surplus of 1 million. Take the 9 million that was approved of the deficit, add the 10.4, we have a $1 million surplus, which would bring the ending fund balance up to 15.9 with a ratio of 23.96%. This is a 4.16 percentage point increase from what was approved in the budget. And then you'll see in 25 through 29, the rate gradually starts going back down. In 27, it gets below the 15% where we like to maintain our fund balance to be able to withstand any emergencies and be able to make payroll without having to do a tax anticipation note or TAN. So in 27, it would fall below 15. And then by 28, it would drop to 6.33, which is below the 8% by policy minimum amount that it can be. And then in 29, down to 2%, which we know we cannot operate with a 6% or a 2% fund balance ratio. We would not be able to make payroll or would not be prepared if any emergency were to happen. Now here are the assumptions under here. You'll see the only thing that has changed from the approved budget was where I added in that $10.4 million under option A that we would get additional revenue by maintaining the millage rate. None of the expenses have changed. It's just like you saw it in the budget. Next is the trends with maintaining the millage rate, but remember we had looked at additional cuts that we had to make in future years, knowing that we have to make some adjustments to our expenditures and or to our revenues to make our balanced budget and to stay fiscally stable. So here, under this scenario, and we'll go over what those cuts are on the next slide. But here you'll see that the ending fund balance still is dropping, but it does not drop to a dangerous level. Nowhere here does it drop below the 8% minimum requirement. The lowest it gets is all the way out to 2029 at 11.9%. Here are those changes that we discussed during the budget process, that we would look at consolidating at least in 2 different years, in 26 and in 28, which means that we would still operate 2 less facilities, and we would still have 48 additional cuts at the school level and 10 at the central office or system level. This again shows the 10.4 million coming in revenue. And remember, that's a reoccurring revenue. It's not just a one-time hit, but that's dollars that will be coming in every year. Here you'll see under where it says reduce expenditures, that's where we're reducing those expenditures that I just showed you. So that we're also, not only are we maintaining the millage rate, but we're also looking at ways that we can cut expenditures. And again, you see the same numbers where it does not drop below 11.9% for the fund balance to expenditure ratio. So what are the benefits for approving option A by the board? So option A of maintaining the millage rate at 16.72 mills adds additional revenue of $10.4 million to the FY 2024 budget and each following year, which results in the following. It provides opportunities to better support learning opportunities for our learners. We'll be able to better support some of the teaching and learning programs and projects that we need to maximize our student achievement. Also provides opportunities to better support our staff, to offer more competitive salaries to our staff, and this in turn will help with recruitment and retention issues. Let me go back a slide because I forgot to mention one thing. Let's see. You'll see right here in FY 2025, highlighted in green, implement salary study for classified employees. Remember, we brought to you that a salary study had been done, but we were not able to put it in the FY 24 budget because we were already operating under over a $9 million deficit. Here, we would be able to add it in 25, excuse me. We're able to better support our staff by looking at those salary increases. We have that additional tax revenue to fund. And for the homeowner with a $150,000 home with homestead exemption, the annual taxes is only increased by $109.71 or $9.14 a month. And without the homestead exemption, $124.20 annually or $10.35 a month. And even without having to consolidate schools and make some major expenditure reductions, the fund balance to expenditure ratio does not fall below 15% until FY 27. So it does give us more time to look at other ways that we also can either increase revenue or reduce expenditures. It puts that, pushes that urgency further down where we can better look at everything that we need to look at. With making the additional expenditure cuts of operating 2 less facilities and reducing the 58 positions, we can fully implement the cost of the classified salary study in 25 and still not drop the fund balance to expenditure ratio below the 11.9% until 2030. What are the next steps if the board were to approve option A? So here's the calendar. On Thursday, the board will have the opportunity to vote on either option A, B, or C. And if they so chose option A, Then on Monday, July 24th, we would post the 2023 Tax Digest and 5-year history. On Tuesday, we would advertise in the paper and also put everything in our website and do a press release. And then August the 1st, we would have an ad in the paper. And on August 1st, we would have public hearing number 1 at 6 p.m. On August the 3rd at 11:30 a.m., public hearing 2. And Thursday, August 10th at 5 p.m., public hearing 3. Now, anytime you do not do a full rollback, you are required by law to do 3 public hearings. So on all options A and B, these 3 public hearings would be necessary. Under option C, full rollback, you would not have public hearings. And then August 10th, immediately following that 3rd hearing, the board would have a call board meeting to finalize the final adoption of the millage rate. And then after that, the tax letters would be sent out by the county. And then payments would come in October 16th and November 15th is when they would be due. Here is the notice under this preliminary tax digest. Now remember, these are going to change once we get the final digest. But this is based on the current numbers that we have, is what the ad would look like if we maintain 16.72 mills. Here is the notice of property tax increase that would have to go out as a press release. Excuse me. In it shows the amount of tax increase. It is a 14.13% increase. It would also show when the 3 public hearings and what time and the location of those hearings. And it also would give the information of the cost to the homeowner for both homestead exemption and non-homestead exemption. Now let's look at option B. So this is doing a partial rollback. Remember that 2.07 millage equivalent that would get us to the full rollback rate? This is taking half of that, or 1.035 mills, and making the millage rate 15.685 mills, based on the preliminary digest. So in this first column, you have the same calculation at the 15.685 mills based on the $5.6 billion digest, which would net in total with all of the items that are not on the digest, and minus the 2.5% fee that remains with the tax commissioner's office and the 2% uncollectible of projected 96.7 million, and it would be a 4.9 million increase to the FY24 budgeted tax revenues. This next slide compares option B to option A. So option B, again, would give us $5.9 million in the next column. Option A, as you may remember, is 10.4 million. So if option B were chosen over option A or C, this would mean that we would lose $5.5 million of revenue potential. Now the cost to the homeowner under this millage rate option for the homestead exemption, the same $150,000, would cost $54.85 to the homeowner on an annual basis and $4.57 on a monthly basis. And without the homestead exemption, $62.10 and monthly $5.18. Here again is what the trends would be with the millage rate, showing that we would still be reducing our millage rate every year since 2016, although costs have definitely risen and the salaries and benefits of our district have definitely increased in these years. This again is the trends without adding any additional cuts in expenditures and not adding any additional tax revenue other than the $4.6 million. So this, under this version, the ratio now in 2026 drops to 9.23%, which is well below the 15% where we feel that we are stable, have a fiscal stable fund balance. And in 2027, it becomes extremely dangerous. And then in 28 and 29, it is not even feasible at all. Here again shows the 4.8 million of additional revenue coming in and no additional cuts in expenditures. Comparing this to the way we presented it at the budget meetings. The next is comparing it to making additional cuts. Even with this option B, in order to get to a stable fund balance ratio between that 8 and 15%, would still require a millage increase of 0.5 mills in 27 and 1 mill in 2028. Of course, this is assuming just a 1% increase in regular digest numbers, not taking into effect the any other rollback numbers or reassessment numbers. But you do see that that rate does drop down in 27 to 10.97%, and then it goes back up in 29 to 11.21%. Here you see the 4.8 million being added to the revenue, but you also see here in the yellow the reductions of those costs that we discussed that are same as in option A. But you'll also notice on that line where it says implement salary study for classified, that is zero out. Option B would not allow that to be implemented under this option. So what are the benefits or the dangers for approving option B? Option B, as a reminder, is the millage rate of 15.685 mills, which adds 4.9 million to the FY24 budget in each following year, which results in the following. It does provide opportunities to better support learning opportunities for our learners, but not as extensive and not for as long. Provides opportunity to better support our staff on a minor basis, but not being able to fully implement the study that we have commissioned. For the homeowner with $150,000, the cost was $54.85 or $457 for a month, and without home extended exemption, $62.10 annually and $518 on a monthly basis. And then without consolidating schools or making major expenditure reductions, that was that first trend analysis I showed you, the fund balance to expenditure ratio does fall below 15% in FY25, leading to potentially needing to borrow funds, a TAN, to meet payroll, and in 2027, the fiscal stability of the district would be in jeopardy. Even with making the additional expenditure cuts of operating 2 less facilities and reducing the 58 positions, we still would not be able to implement the cost of the classified salary study. And the millage rate would need to be adjusted eventually by 0.5 mills in 27 and 1 mill in 28 under this scenario to keep the fiscal stability of the district secure. So what are the next steps if the board were to approve option B? So these are the same steps as option A, because the public hearings, 3 public hearings would still have to be held because it is an increase in taxes, since it's not a full rollback. And here is what the ad would look like under the preliminary tax digest numbers. You'll see the millage rate and the amount of the tax increase is less, but it still is a tax increase. And here is what the notice of property tax increase would be, showing the 7.06% increase in taxes and the 3 hearings, times, and locations. Now, option C is the full rollback millage rate, which would be 14.65 mils. Here, we're comparing FY 2023 to 2022 with the rollback rate of 14.65 mils. In that first column, you'll see that the value of the mill still remains 5.6 million. When you add to that the millage rate calculation, 82.2 million would be your revenue minus your 2.5% would bring it down to 80.2 million, minus the uncollectible would bring it down to 78.8. Then when you add back those things that are not on the digest, it would bring the property tax revenue estimate to 90.2 million. And remember, the approved budget, we had 90.8 million. So we actually would end up having to reduce our fund balance for the FY24 budget by the $691,000 because my projections was $691,000 off on the tax revenue. Here is what the notice would look like. Here would be the trends showing that, again, we would be reducing all the way down to 14.65, which again is lower than the 2012 rate, and that we would have been decreasing every year even though expenditures and salaries have increased. And our status of where we are comparing our salaries to other districts, that gap has gotten bigger every year. So here's the trends with the full rollback and no additional cuts in expenditures. You see here that ratio drops very quickly. In 26, it goes down to 7.9, which is below the policy of a minimum of 8%. And then it goes negative in 2028 and 2029, which we know cannot happen. And here are the assumptions. You see again that revenue is coming out instead of any money being added. We're actually reducing our revenues. And then for the future years, that's just that 1% that we are projecting that the real property would increase. Here again, you see there's no salary study in here. There's no additional increases for any of our initiatives. And also on this scenario, there's no additional cuts. Next, we're going to look at it with making the additional cuts, which we know we have to make additional cuts under this scenario. But even with that, you see that the ratio fund balance as a percent of the annual expenditures. In 2025, it drops to 13.7, which is below where we like to be at 15%. It continues to drop in 2026, and this is even with adding 2 meals in 2026. Because under this version, even to get it within that 8 to 15% range, we would have to increase it by 2 meals. And then it never goes above or even matches the 15% all the way out to 2029. So this again shows the cuts coming out in 2024, the reduction in revenue, and then in 2026, it's showing that additional $11.4 million when we would have to potentially raise the millage rate by 2 meals. That shows that revenue coming in. And that would get us up to a 16.65 millage rate, which is basically where we are now. So what are the benefits and dangers for approving option C? Option C is approving the millage rate at 14.65 mils, adds no additional revenue to the FY24 budget. Instead, it actually reduces the revenue. So we're not able to provide additional opportunities to better support learning opportunities. We're not able to provide any opportunities to better support our staff. And without consolidating schools or making any major expenditure reductions, the fund balance to expenditure ratio falls below 15% in 2025, which could potentially lead to having to have a TAN to meet payroll. In 26, the fiscal stability of the district would be in jeopardy with a fund balance to expenditure ratio of less than 8%. Even with making those additional expenditure cuts of operating 2 less facilities and reducing 58 overall positions, we still would not be able to implement the cost of the classified salary study in 2025. And the millage rate would still need to be adjusted potentially in 2026 to keep the fiscal stability of the district secure. So what are the next steps of option C? Here you'll see everything is the same except for you'll see the removal of the 3 public hearings. No public hearings is required if you adopt full rollback. On the next few slides, I'm going to give you a side-by-side comparison of option A, option B, and option C. So option A, as a reminder, is maintaining the current millage rate. So it's not increasing the millage rate, even though it is considered an increase in taxes, because we will receive that extra money on the reassessed value. Option B with a partial rollback, and option C with a full rollback. Again, you'll see the 10.4 additional revenue coming in under A, 5.2 under B, and a loss of 600,000 under option C. And then if you, the next ones are by each fiscal year, what the fund balance to expenditure ratio that I went over when I discussed each one individually. You just see them side by side under these slides. Now this slide is a comparison of the millage rate trends of Bibb County School District with other school districts. And these are some similar districts, and these are rated from the highest millage rate to the lowest millage rate. So of all of these districts, you'll notice that Bibb is the 4th from the bottom, although really it's the 3rd from the bottom if you exclude Houston County, because as we know, Houston County has an OLOS, which allows them to use that sales tax revenue that they're able to reduce their millage rate to offset. Just the way Macon Bibb County now has the OLOS, where they're able to reduce their millage rate to offset that OLOS. So it's 3rd from the bottom of these districts, and these are the districts that we are normally comparing ourselves to. Henry County, as you see, is up at 23.629 mills. Muskogee, and all of those that have zeros in that very last column means that they have not rolled back their rate last year. They kept their rate maintained. And you'll notice some of them, like Henry County, has maintained a 20 millage rate all the way up into 21 when they increased it. And then Muskogee, the same thing. They've maintained the millage rate. So a lot of these districts are maintaining their millage rate year after year, and that's how they've been able to close that gap between their salaries that they offer their teachers and the salaries we're able to offer our teachers, because we're not getting the benefit of that additional revenue by maintaining our rate that other districts are receiving. And here is comparison of the options with the benefits and the dangers. So opportunities to better support opportunities for our learners. Option A, yes. Option B, for a short period of time, but not for the whole period. And option C, no, because we are having to maintain the budget that was approved. We're not able to add anything additional to the budget. Opportunities to better support our staff through salary increases. Option A, yes, you saw that we were able to implement the classified salary study. B, yes, but not as much. We weren't able to do a full implementation of the salary study. And under option C, no, and nowhere was it able to be implemented under those scenarios. And consolidate schools over the next 5 years under option A, you potentially wouldn't have to. You might still need to, though, and able to make that fund balance even stronger. So that would still be on the table. I'm not saying it will come off, but it would not be as urgent as it is with the other options. So yes, you would have to under B and C. Possibility of a TAN to meet payroll, no under option A. It becomes a possibility in future years for option B and option C. Increase in millage rate in future years is not likely in the future 5 years, because this is just a 5-year projection. It's not likely that the millage rate would have to be increased. We never know exactly what may be thrown our way as far as expenditures from the state or what the tax digest will bring in the future, but with the healthy growth that we expect our county to keep seeing, we would not expect that to happen under option A. Under option B, it showed a 0.5 mil in 27 and a 1 mil in 28. And then under option C, 2 mils in 26. And then the annual, monthly, and annual and monthly costs of the homestead and non-homestead exemptions are shown here side by side. And that's the end of the presentation for tonight.